Coming up, Congresswoman Teresa Leger Fernandez talks Navajo affairs and policy affecting Indian country. Plus, tribes along the Pacific Northwest coast are in a desperate fight to fend off an invasive species. And we'll hear about the efforts to find reasons behind mental health issues facing Native youth. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is honored to be a supporter of Indian Country Today. Working with award-winning professors, Cronkite students learn news reporting, social media, shooting and editing videos, and producing content for communications industries. Cronkite's 15 professional programs give students the opportunity to cover critical issues throughout the U.S. and beyond. Learn more at cronkite.asu.edu.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Go'atsi Hopa. Thank you for joining us. We start in Florida, where emergency funding is being set aside for tribal communities affected by Hurricane Ian. President Joe Biden approved an expedited major disaster declaration for the Seminole Tribe of Florida. The declaration provides aid that will be used for recovery efforts like temporary housing and home repairs. Additionally, the aid can also be used for low-cost loans that will cover uninsured property losses, as well as other programs that will help individuals and business owners. Seminole citizens who sustained losses in the designated areas can apply for disaster assistance at www.disasterassistance.gov or by calling 800-621-3362. Well, a new federal program is aiming to increase food sovereignty in Indian country. The Department of the Interior has launched its program called Indigenous Food Hubs. In partnership with the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Bureau of Indian Education, the hubs will provide food that is sourced from Native producers and vendors, and they will also serve as a center for educational resources, such as training for cooks. So far, there are 4 food hubs at BIE schools and 4 at BIA detention centers. For the first time, a nutritionist will be hired to support the bureaus in their development of culturally appropriate nutrition programming. The ultimate goal of the program is to develop an approach to food that draws from Indigenous knowledge and incorporates tribal history. Back to Florida, where preparations are underway for NASA's next launch to the International Space Station. The Crew 5 mission is set to blast off this week from the Kennedy Space Center, and there will be history made when that happens, as Nicole Mann is set to become the first Native woman to go to space. Here's ICT's Pacey Smith-Garcia with the story.
Nicole Mann will make history as the first Native American woman to lead a space mission. Mann, who is Wilaki of the Round Valley Indian tribes, will be heading to the International Space Station aboard the SpaceX Crew 5 mission. Before becoming an astronaut, she served in the U.S. Marine Corps and is currently a colonel. When asked why she became an astronaut, she gave a laughing explanation.
It was a little bit later on in life, actually, that I realized that being an astronaut was an opportunity and something that I could do. And to be honest, I didn't understand when I was younger what astronauts actually did. And so once I, became a little more educated and learned of these possibilities, I was all in. And, it's excited to be a part, I think, of this team that explores space and human exploration, right? And the development of things that are going to benefit humans back on Earth. To me, that makes me very excited, and I just feel fortunate to be a part of it.
Once aboard the International Space Station, she'll be working for 6 months to conduct around 250 experiments.
But there's some really cool science on board. One of the ones that I'm looking most forward to is called Biofabrication Facility. And it is literally 3D printing human cells, which to me sounds so futuristic, right?
Mann, being the first Native woman in space, hopes to set an example for Indigenous children.
There is no end to the possibilities. And so if you're interested in math or science, or if you're interested in art or engineering, whatever that is, whatever you're passionate about, go for it and pursue that request or that dream. And it's okay to ask for help along the way. I had a lot of help on the way. It won't always be easy, but it's definitely worth it.
John Harrington, the first native man in space, brought items with him such as eagle feathers and flags to space. In the same way, man will also be bringing items to the space station that represent her life.
Definitely taking like my wedding rings, and then I have this dream catcher that my mother gave me when I was very young, and it's kind of always stayed with me throughout my time, and that's a little piece of me that I'll take just on a personal note.
Nicole Mann will leave the Earth along with the rest of her crew from the Kennedy Space Center aboard the Dragon spacecraft. In Phoenix, Arizona, Pacey Smith Garcia, ICT News.
In Texas, a tribal nation is celebrating its first female chief. Millie Thompson Williams was elected to serve as the second chief for the Alabama-Coushatta tribe of Texas. The role of the second chief is to serve as an ambassador for the tribe and to provide cultural advice. Williams has been a lifetime member of the community and is an educator with the tribe's Head Start program. She is also a Sunday school teacher who teaches classes in her native language. Rick Sleistein, the tribe's chairman, said this was a historic moment for his people, and he hopes it will send a positive message for younger generations. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Food, dancing, and parades. Those were some of the sights in Shiprock, New Mexico over the weekend at the Northern Navajo Nation Fair. One of the many attendees was Congresswoman Teresa Leger Fernandez. She's one of New Mexico's 3 representatives in the U.S. Congress, and much of her district includes several tribal nations. Hello, Representative. Welcome back to the ICT Newscast.
Hello, and it's wonderful to be back here. It was a great 4 days in Shiprock, and I went to 4 different chapter houses and schools. It was marvelous, but yeah, food was a key element of everything we did.
This year's theme was Dene History, Harvest, and Healing. I mean, you already started, but tell us more about the event this year.
So the parade, I need to tell everybody, the Shiprock Parade, I think, is my favorite parade. My parade season starts in May, and Shiprock Parade is always the last parade that we do. It is thousands upon thousands of people come to view it. They have hundreds of floats, and everybody takes such care to highlight the theme, to build their own floats, highlighting those themes. And of course, I was there, I will say, in my capacity as a candidate to be reelected to Congress. And I think it's really key because I do serve as chair of the subcommittee on Indigenous peoples. So I have a very deep knowledge of the issues that affect people in Shiprock. On the food, we talked a bit about both the delicious, the kneel down bread I had was delicious, but you spoke about food sovereignty earlier. I've introduced the Tribal Nutrition Sovereignty Act, which would allow tribes, to take over those USDA programs, so that we'll have 10 pilot sites, so that they can actually provide culturally relevant food, and that tribal children will all be eligible for free lunch meals and meals at school, and that they can decide how do they source their food. For example, at the Navajo Nation, the Shiprock Parade, there are many, many farmers, many Navajo farmers. There's the Navajo agricultural products industry. There is such a rich tradition and bounty of healthy food that's available, that we would want them to be able to say, we're going to take over this USDA programs so that we are providing the food, and we are deciding what kind of food should be served that would be the most nutritious for our children.
One of the other major issues that Indian country cares about, of course, is Native veterans. And I understand you actually found a way to honor the late Navajo code talker Samuel Sandoval. How did you do that?
Well, we presented his widow, with a flag that had been flown over the Capitol, as well as an entry into the congressional record. The entry into the congressional record noted not just the heroic efforts of the code talkers in World War II. As we all know, the code was never broken, helped us win the war. But more importantly, those code talkers came home and were leaders in their community for the rest of their lives. And that was the case with the code talkers. So we provided them with a flag that had flown over the Capitol, as well as the entry into the congressional record, which will be there forever. So once in the congressional record, it will be there forever. And we gave our deep appreciation to his widow, because we always know it's the whole family that participates and that is impacted when our veterans go off to serve. And then when they come home and give so much more to the community. We have 2 Navajo code talkers left. One is 104 years old. And so it shows you the longevity of many of the Navajo people. And of course, Mr. McDonald is not quite as old. He's in his mid-90s.
You mentioned earlier that you, of course, are up for re-election. I want to ask you, in New Mexico, how big of a deal the Native vote is in your re-election campaign, but in the state in general.
I have worked on voting rights issues with Native Americans for decades, and so I think it's a huge issue. In my district, we have the 20% of the district are Native Americans, so that's the population. But I will note that in my new district I got redistricted, only 6% of the voter turnout is Native American. So that shows that there is a long way that we need to go to increase voter participation, because we know that democracy depends on everybody being able to vote, being able to have their voice at the table and heard, which is why I've always pushed voting rights issues to increase that. In my last district, when it looked like my district changed, I also had 20% of the population, but we were able to get the voter participation, Native American voter participation, up to 11%. So I'm going to have a same goal of let's get that voter participation up from 6% of the voting to 11%, and keep, setting the targets higher, because we know that I will always listen to Navajo because I spent 30 years working with tribes and tribal communities, but we want everybody to recognize that importance. And in Arizona, as an example, the decision in 2020, Biden won the state of Arizona, and Cali won for the Senate because of Native American voter participation. They increased their voter participation in Arizona. And we also know, sadly, that in response to that, Arizona passed voter restriction laws, which will make it harder for Native Americans in Arizona to vote. I have championed changes at the federal level so that Arizona law can't go into effect. Unfortunately, because of the filibuster, we weren't able to pass them this year, but I'm going to continue fighting for them, because we cannot let those who would suppress our vote to succeed. We will keep fighting against that. And we will do everything we can, because we know that in North Dakota, when they tried to suppress the Native American vote, Native Americans got out and voted anyway, but it was they shouldn't have to jump through the hurdles that are being put in front of them. This year, we also, last week, we passed PAVA to increase the voter access. And actually, that will increase the ability of Native American voter access in Farmington. And so that was a bill that was actually, I was an original co-sponsor, Senator Lujan's bill, and that passed into law just last week. And so we will be looking forward to, we have to fight it everywhere. In New Mexico, we're really doing really well. We know we value the Native American vote in some places, like we saw in Arizona. So if you're listening to this in Arizona, show them that you are going to show up and vote, because they're not going to silence us.
Representative Leger Fernandez from New Mexico, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tribes along the Pacific Northwest coast are dealing with an invasive species of crab. The European green crab is a threat to native species such as shellfish and eelgrass, which is crucial for the salmon and other fish. These crabs also prey on young oysters and can dig 6 inches into the sea bottom to find clams. And their appetite is enormous. One green crab can eat 40 clams a day, and when they dig deep, they wreck the estuary and marsh habitats. Joining us today to talk about this major problem is Ed Johnstone. He's the chairman of the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission. Thank you for being here today, Ed.
Thank you. You're welcome.
How did the European green crab get here in the first place?
Well, they float in the water as you know, they catch the currents. It's the larvae, and until now the larvae had come from the California current from down, for instance, in San Francisco Bay. But what's happening now that they've come into Willapa, which is south of our usual and customary, into Grace Harbor, which is where we fish and we crab, and they're in Grace Harbor now. But up into the north, the Macaw tribe, they have green crab, and over into Lummi Nation, which declared a disaster, they're there. So now we have the threats of the larvae coming from the south, but now through Puget Sound over into the Straits of Juan de Fuca down the coast into Grace Harbor. So we are impacted from both directions, and that's very troubling.
Maybe talk about what kinds of devastation this means specifically for the fish.
Well, you mentioned that in the intro, is these European green crabs that have been around in North America for a long time. They were predominantly in the East Coast, up into Canada through the St. Lawrence Seaway, even into the Eastern Seaboard. And they've had their program of adapting, I guess you would say. Here on the West Coast, we're about trying to eradicate these green crab. Well, as you mentioned, they're shoreside. They're in the mud. They burrow into the eelgrass. The eelgrass at high water or refugia. It's areas where the small juvenile salmon come down in as they're migrating out to the ocean. They get in the eelgrass, and their protection from predation. Their little food sources are there, and then the salmon would migrate out. The oysters and the Dungeness crab, for instance, are very critical to the Grace Harbor economy, as well as the tribes or the Quinault Indian Nation and our crab fishery in the bay and into the ocean. So has a lot of devastating impact to us that we're just on the edges of just this decade or so. And these green crab came in, were noticed by oyster harvesters, and was noted in 2015 to 2017. And they came in on El Nino, the currents that came from the south. And these warm water occurrences are what brought the larvae in the currents, and they started to burrow in and to become invasive in Grace Harbor. And it was noted, the oystermen noted that to the authorities, the state of Washington, but little was done. And then we have had many years, maybe 8 to 10 years of activity in these shoreline here, where we did a capture study over the last couple of years, and there's significant and alarming numbers. And the destruction of the eelgrass, the threats for our clams and for our Dungeness crab are real. And so we're kind of behind the 8 ball here at Grace Harbor.
Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time, so we'll have to check with you and again about these European green crabs. It sounds like quite the issue, but Ed Johnstone, thank you so much.
Well,
Hearings are taking place across Indian country to learn more about mental health issues facing Native American and Native Hawaiian children. They are being held by the Alice Spotted Bear and Walter Soboleff Commission on Native Children. Joining us today is Dolores Zubia Bigfoot. She's a commissioner with the organization. Thank you for being here today, Dolores.
Thank you for the invitation.
Congress actually mandated this commission, so maybe start by explaining the focus of the Commission on Native Children.
The Commission on Native Children was mandated by Congress in 2017. It was a bipartisan effort that was actually the former senator from North Dakota, Heidi Heilkamp, and her colleague that really was instrumental in establishing it. Of course, it got sidetracked a bit because of COVID, but we are going across the country. We have had hearings in Arizona and California, Navajo, Alaska. And what we're hoping to do is make recommendations that can be better for the coordination of American and Alaska Native children and also Native Hawaiian children. So we'll be having a hearing in Hawaii in February of 2023. We recognize that there's a lot of Native children, including Native Hawaiian children, that are within child welfare systems, within detention, out-of-home placement. And so what are the things that we can do to better the outcome for these children and their families? And are there efforts that can be reviewed and improved at the federal level, at the state level, at the tribal level, and also coordination between all of those government entities to improve the outcome for children? And we know that through the adverse childhood experience study that when there are, bad things that happen to children, substance abusing parents, or suicide in the family members, that things happen, that children suffer from poor mental health and potentially doing or involved in criminal activities or detention, dropping out of school, and poor physical health, and also potential early death. So what we want to do is, go to different communities, like we're here in Oklahoma this year, or this week in Oklahoma City having hearings. We're visiting the El Reno Indian Health Clinic and the Shine Arapaho education program. So we're doing site visits and, finding out what is working. So what are the things that, our tribal governments or urban Indian programs are doing that are working and are better serving our tribal communities.
At a high level, can you maybe tell us about the timeline of these hearings and when they'll ultimately culminate in these recommendations that you're talking about?
Well, like I said, the hearings, the commission started in 2017, but the hearings were delayed because of COVID. So we have an extension. Thank goodness for the administration extending this. So it's extended till 2024.
2024, and I imagine that's when you will prepare these recommendations for members of Congress. Maybe based off of these early hearings, can you maybe tell us, what the biggest recommendation you'll make is? And we only have about a minute left here, so I hate to leave you on such a big answer, but I am very curious.
Well, I think that we have been listening to a lot of different individuals and agencies talk about what are some of the things that they see as being beneficial. Language programs are really a critical part. Looking at tribal identity, helping formulate opportunities for children to learn more about their culture, being able to have more opportunities for education. So there's a variety of things I think that we are seeing that's sort of consistent over many of the hearings. But we will be writing these up formally and submitting that recommendation to Congress. So we're looking forward to doing that.
Well, Dolores Subia-Bigfoot, thank you so much for telling us about these hearings.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.